Hello everyone. With all the information available to students today, it can be difficult to determine which sources are trustworthy and which are, well, trash. In this presentation, I will explain how to recognize credible, trustworthy sources. Let's get started. According to the MLA handbook, there are over 50 types of sources. This can be overwhelming for students. Luckily, for the most part, students are unlikely to use all the types of sources MLA recognizes. The most common sources students will use in their academic career include websites, academic articles, books, television series, films, and online videos. I will not be able to explain how to recognize trustworthy sources in each of these categories without creating an excessively long presentation, and no one wants that. However, I will provide some general tips to help you determine the credibility of a wide variety of sources. A source's credibility is built on trust. Without trust, we cannot determine if the information we are receiving is valuable. When analyzing a source's credibility, it helps to start with the source's publisher. Look into who published the information you are thinking of using for your research essay. I suggest considering the following questions. Does the information come from a reputable news organization? Is a government department the publisher? What about a university or college? If it's an organization, is the organization unbiased or apolitical in its agenda? For book publishers, is it a university press? If these questions cannot be answered immediately, or if you are unfamiliar with the publisher, then do some research on the publisher. Who runs the company or organization? How is it funded? What other works do they publish? Should any of the answers to these questions give you pause regarding the source's trustworthiness, I suggest finding another source that is more trustworthy. After learning about the source's publisher, do some research into the author or authors of the source. Learning about the author can better inform you of their trustworthiness as a source of information. Answering the following questions can help you learn more about the writer and their credibility. Who are they? Are they a full-time employee for the organization or publisher? Who else have they written for? What other texts, articles, books have they written? What is their specialty? Are they consistently unbiased in their other writings? If they are offering analysis, as opposed to strict fact-telling, do they rely on sound logical reasoning? Do they use any logical fallacies? While it might not be possible to answer all of these questions, answering most of them should give you a good idea of the author's credibility. The less you can find out about the author or authors, the more likely that the source is untrustworthy. Even government departments that publish information written by whole teams provide information about the department itself. I also suggest looking to see if there is a way to contact the author or group. Any source that does not allow readers to contact them in some way should be treated as untrustworthy. Research and the communication of ideas are essentially ongoing conversations, and so sources will provide the reader with access to the research they use to craft their own texts. In short, credible, trustworthy sources will provide access to the sources they used. Answering the following questions can inform you if the source is credible or not. Does the source follow a specific publishing standard? MLA, APA, Chicago, AP. Does the source include both in-text citations and works cited or references pages? If it's an online source, does it include hyperlinks to their sources? Double-checking the sources a text uses can also help you determine if the text is trustworthy. Anyone who does not want you to check the sources for yourself should be considered untrustworthy. Knowledge is meant to be shared, not withheld. Another way of testing a writer's credibility is to look for any logical fallacies. A logical fallacy is a fault in reasoning. Logical fallacies sound good on the surface, but they cannot hold up to scrutiny. For some examples of the most common logical fallacies students face, I have a list here. First, the Strawman Fallacy occurs when someone misrepresents an argument to make theirs stronger. The fallacy occurs because the speaker cannot debate the argument as it stands, and so they alter the argument in order to attack it. Second, the slippery slope fallacy occurs when there is an unsupportable relationship being established between two events. If this happens, then this other thing will happen, so we should not support this. It's a fallacy because of the tenuous relationship between cause and effect that's being established. The speaker or writer is giving greater weight to events that are unlikely to happen just to instill fear in their audience. Third, the anecdotal fallacy occurs when someone uses a personal or isolated experience instead of relying on sound logic or substantial evidence. Fourth, the Texas Sharpshooter fallacy occurs when someone only selects evidence that supports their argument and ignores any evidence that contradicts their argument. Or they find a pattern that suits their argument when other, more valid explanations are available. Fifth, an appeal to nature fallacy occurs when someone asserts that something is valid, justified, good, or ideal because it is natural. Comparing human concerns to nature is rarely supportable because nature is often more complex than people realize, and so the comparisons are weak. Sixth, the no true Scotsman fallacy occurs when someone appeals to a sense of purity to dismiss relevant criticisms. For example, someone on Twitter once told me that I was not a true Texan because I didn't fully support Ted Cruz. And seventh, the burden of proof fallacy occurs when someone claims that others must prove their claim for them, or when instead of supporting their own claims with evidence and reasoning, the speaker or writer pushes their audience to look up the information for themselves, falsely assuming that the audience will reach the same conclusion. For more information on logical fallacies, I suggest visiting the website Your Logical Fallacy Is. People often talk of bias without being able to define exactly what it is, how it might affect another's reasoning, or how it might affect their own. In short, a bias heavily favors a specific idea, usually as a result of closed-minded and prejudicial thinking. Although the following may seem obvious, it must be said nevertheless. Everyone has a bias of some kind. It's human nature. Just because a source expresses a slight bias, that does not mean the information is useless or that the source is completely untrustworthy. Bias becomes a problem when it disproportionately affects the gathering and presentation of evidence and the conclusions based on that evidence. The most common biases that students might experience include the following. Implicit bias is difficult to recognize because it's a bias that is unconscious. That is, people are unaware of how their actions toward others are affected by bias. Implicit biases are learned from a person's home and cultural environment. The Dunning-Kruger Effect refers to the phenomenon where people with knowledge, experience, and intelligence have little confidence in their expertise, whereas people with little expertise demonstrate a profound level of confidence in their own knowledge and intelligence. Confirmation bias occurs when we seek out information that confirms our beliefs and deny evidence that contradicts those beliefs. A self-serving bias occurs when we shift the blame of failures or negative outcomes to other people or outside forces while simultaneously attributing the positive outcomes to our own skills. Finally, decline bias prefers the past to the present and suggests that current situations are in a state of decline, despite evidence to the contrary. For more information on biases, I have provided 2 links on this slide. One comes from the website Psychology Today, which is inconsistent in the quality of its articles, but the link I've provided contains reliable information. The second article comes from a more reliable source, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Thank you for watching, and please let me know if you have any questions.